This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. We also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 31st of August 2021, and I am Miss K.
I am CS.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. In the Daily Nation, politicians take 2022 battle to the church. In the Standard, panic as presidents plan big shake-up. In the Star, Uhuru wants Raila to climb Mount Kenya alone, and People Daily, Matiang'i to meet MPs on Ruto guards. Ms. K, kick us off.
Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the events of the weekend, and as Napoleon Bonaparte is famously quoted as saying, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake.
Yeah.
Now, a casual observer of the actions in the UDA camp in the past couple of months would agree that some political blunders or mistakes have been made in that camp. And according to Kunihiko Miyake, a former Japanese diplomat and a foreign policy expert, there are three kinds of mistakes in politics. Simple mistakes, serious mistakes, and fatal mistakes.
That's interesting.
Yes. Simple mistakes are the kind of mistakes that cause no serious harm. Simple mistakes can be easily corrected or undone, and simple mistakes serve to confirm how foolish politicians can be. For instance, supporting the Jubilee administration but claiming credit for its successes could be an example of a simple UDA mistake. You don't want to be associated with Jubilee, but you want to take credit for all its successes.
That's right.
But you can undo them, just say the truth. Serious mistakes cannot be corrected or easily undone, and they cause harm to the nation, or in this case, UDA. Therefore, serious mistakes should be handled carefully, and wise politicians strive not to repeat such mistakes, and life goes on. So UDA committed a serious mistake when its members were unable to articulate their bottom-up economic model, and we ended up with the corrupted matoconomics narrative that they really cannot shake off. Fatal mistakes are not only irreversible, they are also extremely detrimental to the nation or the party. Fatal mistakes are often made out of intuition, coincidence, and misjudgments, and politicians do not always recognize when they make fatal mistakes. So I'll ask a couple of questions. Could the wash expose be a fatal mistake for the affiliated politicians? Are they guilty by association? And just after Serikali denied DP a gate pass to Uganda, People Daily reported that they had it on good authority from impeccable sources that the frequent trips to Uganda could be linked to money laundering schemes. So is this some form of political conmanship, and are we as a nation falling victim to it? I mean, we could be wrong about all of this, and either way, we will not interrupt UDA as they slip up. We will just sip this hot tea quietly, because as Baba Moi said, Nguruwe hujikaanga na mafuta yake.
You know, I will agree with one thing that the DP has sometimes said, that Kenya ikona upungufu ya watu wajinga. So you won't get away with that one. Now, looking into the headline in the Standard, panic as president plans shake-up, a concert of sentiments would readily agree that Kenya's political tectonic plates have shifted significantly. So much so that if you took a random sample of recent headlines and time traveled with them back to 2013, people would scoff at you for subjecting them to bad comedy. One would have hardly believed that then that the political landscape and terrain would shift so significantly. Even so, in light of present reality, maybe we should go one step further and be bold enough to admit that it is also time that the topography of government also reflect the political landscape. Fact, the executive in its current form was designed in response to a bygone political arrangement. That arrangement and the design it has left behind are no longer tenable. When we say that the government should reflect the face of Kenya, we should not stop at inclusiveness in terms of ethnicity and gender. The political countenance of country should also be captured prominently in that portrait. Surely, what can be more representative than a government of national unity? If the fruits and dividends of the handshake doctrine are tangible and plain to see, then just maybe the spirit of the time should precipitate a formalization of the handshake through a government of national unity in the national interest. And if we are honest with ourselves, we would recognize that the political calm and peace we are now enjoying is because of the wisdom and courage of Uhuru and Raila, who put pause to the potentially destructive trajectory we were embarking on and set sail in a new direction. Can you just imagine what tear gas Mondays would have been like during the COVID pandemic? On that note, even with the COVID disruption, the president, by his own admission, attested to the fact that he had achieved a lot more in his second term than in his first term. If these are the fruits resulting from the inclusiveness of the handshake, then how much more fruitful would the remaining year be under an even more inclusive government of national unity? But still, being honest, having recognized that, we should be just as quick to recognize that we are going into an election year. The year before and after an election are historically notorious for having negative impacts on the business environment and the economy. In light of the disruption caused by COVID, which may have been a lot worse without the timely interventions by the president, the fact remains Kenyans cannot afford COVID disruption followed by the political disruption of an election year. A government of national unity therefore becomes a necessity because of the stability it would ensure or the potential disruption it would at least mitigate.
They do say that the Kibaki Raila government of national unity was some of our most economically productive days.
Yeah, that's right. Now, inspired by the Stars headline, Uhuru wants Raila to climb Mount Kenya alone, and given the challenges that Raila is facing in Mount Kenya, I'd like to offer him some advice on how to navigate the next few months in central Kenya. Remain foolish and remain ignorant. And here's a story from England's Women's Football League to illustrate what I mean. It's a story about Lucy Bronze. So Lucy was born in the year 1991 and plays as a right back for the English club Manchester City, as well as the English national football team. So a few years ago, England were playing Spain and the ball struck Lucy's teammate, Ellen White. The Italian referee saw the handball and immediately blew for a penalty against England. When that happened, Lucy Bronze ran straight to the referee. She calmly spoke about what just happened. The referee listened, nodded, and reversed her decision. So the penalty was reversed. Now, how did this happen? Lucy Bronze later explained in an interview that before the match, UEFA had asked the referees to brief the players. And in that meeting, Lucy had been taking careful notes. So when the ball struck Ellen White's arm, Lucy was able to quote the referee's words back to her. She reminded the referee that she had said a handball couldn't be awarded when it is the result of a deflection. And in this case, the ball had struck Ellen White's thigh, then bounced up onto her arm. So, under the rules, that wasn't a handball, hence why she reversed her decision to award a penalty. Now, that would never, ever, ever happen in the male game, the male version of football. Can you even imagine a male player taking notes in a briefing with referees? Never. And that is where women bit us, right? But by listening, by thinking, then explaining to the referee, Lucy Bronze had saved a penalty, and England actually went on to win that game 2-0. Now, Lucy here demonstrated brilliance in two ways. First, she looked for an advantage in a place nobody else was even thinking about. And in this case, it was these technicalities, that were being explained by them to the referees before the match even began. But number two, she remained ignorant and foolish. And remaining ignorant and foolish is the difference between a winner and a loser. The loser usually acts like he knows it all. He doesn't need to pay attention. The winner acts like he needs to learn everything he can. So the winner is hungry for information. The loser assumes nothing will go wrong, but the winner assumes assumes that it will all go wrong. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And in this story, Raila Odinga should be more like Lucy. Already he is more like Lucy. Getting into central Kenya, he is the underdog. Ruto, on the other hand, currently He's behaving like your typical male player in a football match. Doesn't want to take any notes. Is just assuming that he knows it all. So
are you telling Raila to be humble as he approaches Central Kenya while Ruto is being brazen and informing Central Kenya what is good for it?
Absolutely.
Considering
Absolutely.
Ruto isn't even attending cabinet meetings, he's not there when the referees talking.
Yeah. He's not, and that is how he'll end up
With
being
technical
defeated.
penalties.
Precisely. Now, we've got a 3-part criteria that we use to assess the headlines. Are they topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, and thoughtful or just plain lazy? I think we should award the winning headline to The Standard. Panic as President plans big shakeup.
Completely agree. We do want the president to remain unpredictable and ruthless as we enter this final term. Let them never know or see where you're coming from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And now, on to our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So what is our final thought?
The theme for Final Thought this week is economic miracles, and today we begin with the Dutch economic miracle, which is considered to be the first economic miracle in the world. Let me begin by defining the term economic miracle. Now, the term economic miracle refers to a situation where a relatively weak and economically obscure region manages to achieve staggering economic growth rates against all odds, or when a country that is perceived as an underdog defies all expectations and odds to emerge as a leading economic powerhouse. Now, the first time this happened was in the northern provinces in the Netherlands in the late 16th and 17th centuries. The Dutch-American historian K.W. Swart called it the first economic miracle, and in other historical texts, this same economic period is called the Dutch Golden Age. The Netherlands, as a region, was originally part of the Spanish Habsburg Empire. However, in 1568, the provinces in the Netherlands revolted against Spanish rules. These provinces wanted political independence and religious freedom. After an 80-year war of independence, the northern Netherlands finally gained independence. The Dutch economic miracle refers to that extraordinary economic rise that these northern provinces had. And this economic rise started during that 80-year independence war, and it was caused largely by 4 things. One, there was a large influx of skilled craftsmen and wealthy merchants from the southern Netherlands, which is present-day Belgium, and these merchants and craftsmen subscribed to the Protestant faith. And since the Habsburg Empire asked those persons who didn't want to convert to Roman Catholicism to leave the empire, they carried their brains, their skills, and their money to this previously underdeveloped northern Netherlands. 2, it's said that these Protestants had a strenuous and extremely productive work ethic. They educated themselves and they put in long work hours. I don't know, but I guess maybe it's true. And 3, there was an availability of cheap energy resources in the northern Netherlands. Windmills, so ubiquitous with the Netherlands, a cheap energy source, were present in large numbers through these provinces. And finally, 4, the northern Netherlands was favorably located as a major trade route. This enabled it to conduct trade with Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the Baltic Seas, and the Mediterranean. And that's why Amsterdam became, and to some extent still is, a most important port city in Europe. I'll hand over to CS to break these 4 things down.
I'll pick up on those 4 things, which primarily contributed to the Dutch economic miracle. And maybe we might even draw some parallels. We will compare the Dutch economic miracle with Kenya's economic acceleration.
That's right.
Now, as Ms. Kea said, the first cause of the Dutch economic miracle was a large influx of skilled craftsmen and wealthy merchants. This significantly added to the intelligentsia of the country. Because of this, Amsterdam became the premier port city of Europe. In similar fashion, Kenya hosts the largest expatriate community on the continent.
Wow, I didn't know that.
This is evident from the significant number of multinationals and NGOs that have chosen Nairobi as either their regional hub. In large part, this can be attributed to the fact that President Uhuru has adopted policies which have made Kenya the most advanced and diversified economy in East Africa, which is partly why our foreign direct investment is consistently far above the global average. That's also a fact. The second cause of the Dutch economic miracle, it is widely claimed that the Protestant faith promotes a strenuous and extremely productive work ethic, and Max Weber wrote extensively on this. Its focus is largely on putting in long hours as well as gaining a certain basic education. Now, this distinctive work ethic contributed extensively to the economic miracle. We would argue that whereas the Dutch economic miracle took place in the age of the Protestant Reformation, Kenya's economic acceleration is taking place during the digital age. And in this respect, Kenya leads in terms of technological innovation, cementing its place as a regional hub. The Harvard Business Review actually recently referred to Kenya as a definitive exemplar in developing hyper-efficient mobile infrastructure. And one of the key enablers of such an ecosystem is President Uhuru's digital economy blueprint, which is aimed at, in his words, realizing the potential of digital transformation that will leapfrog our economies to prosperous heights, aka economic acceleration. The third cause of the Dutch economic miracle was the availability of energy resources, which immensely contributed to the economic miracle. Windmills, the cheapest sources of energy, were present in large numbers throughout the provinces. In addition to this, the invention of the wind-powered sawmill led to the rapid processing of wood, which was used to manufacture ships, which JM will unpack a bit more on. Now, unless you're a stranger in Jerusalem, everyone and their grandmother should know that by now that Kenya has been able to achieve electricity access rates of over 75%. And furthermore, Kenya is one of the few countries to develop geothermal energy in the region. Energy is essential for manufacturing, and the investments in energy will pay dividends in terms of economic acceleration. The fourth cause of the Dutch economic miracle was the fact that it was favorably located on a major trade routes, which enabled it to conduct trade with Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Baltic Seas, and the Mediterranean. Now, Amsterdam became the most important city in Europe, as Ms. K has pointed out. As for Kenya, our geographical location makes the country ideal for strategic partnerships aimed at improving regional and global market share. The ports of Mombasa and now Lamu, as well as the Kenya-Uganda Railway, improved by SGR, and also the Lapsset Corridor, these make us the gateway to East and Central Africa. And then on the global stage, JKIA functions as an effective air hub between Africa, Europe, and Asia. Additionally, Kenya's membership of regional economic blocs, coupled with its strategic geographic position, make the country the gateway to the huge EAC and COMESA regional markets and a beneficiary of several preferential trade arrangements.
Wow. You know what this calls for?
What?
Guys. 3 cheers for Uhuru Kenyatta. Hip hip.
Hooray!
Hip hip.
Hooray!
Hip hip.
Hooray!
Absolutely. A lot of work has gone on in reviving our economy, setting us up for 10% GDP growth rate as the Vision 2030 calls for. Now, let me speak a little bit, continue unpacking. Brilliant. The economic history of the Netherlands is an extremely, extremely interesting one. It has a story of, a boy being poor as dirt, becoming, however, a world economic power. But then they also went on to be crushed by debt, but then again, being saved by the energy lottery. Now, one of the hottest debates amongst economic historians to date is how an economy goes from feudalism to a market economy, and so successfully. And the Netherlands offers a very interesting insight into this debate. So first off, the Netherlands was simply a collection of feudal towns before the year 1433. But in that year, the Duke of Burgundy created the Netherlands by uniting these little towns. However, this new state was not blessed with being able to feed its people. And so the lowlands and, within the lowlands, they were not conducive for grain to grow. And thus, the Duke encouraged trade as a means to allow the Dutch to earn and feed itself. So it primarily bought grain from the east and sold it to Belgium, northern France, and Britain. So they were basically thrust into this trade culture on the basis of having to survive. So this trade required that Holland then establish a right to trade freely with what is now East Germany, Poland, Ukraine, as well as to use the Baltic ports that you have briefly mentioned. But it wasn't until about almost 100 years later 1585, that the country's economy really took off. This was the start of this golden period for Holland. It also marked what many believe to be the beginning of capitalism, at least in Europe, modern-day Europe. Because Holland lacked so many resources, it made up with technology and innovation. One of the most important was the use of windmills to saw logs in the huge forests. And this remains a very iconic symbol of the Netherlands that we associated with. And the resultant massive reduction in sawn timber costs meant cheaper ships, which in turn meant also cheaper grain and cheaper ways of transporting goods from one point to the other. More tonnage shipped also meant more ships and more trade, resulting into bigger fleets, and then they were able to really dominate that area within Europe. Standardization also allowed for bigger and more innovative ships as well to carry bigger loads. And innovation then spread and eventually included things such as building atlases, charting, mapping of the southern star constellations up in the sky. There was a pendulum clock which they're associated with, standard temperature scales, the spin watch, and all sorts of other scientific instruments to help them navigate the world. These are part of their contributions to the world from this era. But it was the explosion in innovation in trade that was the most awe-inspiring, right? So we're told that they registered the first mega corporation, private corporation, the Dutch East India Company, known as VOC. And this is, almost 400 years before the Imperial British East Africa Company, for example, right? These guys are the pioneers. They invented this instrument we call dividends. They refined the art of auctioning. They took it to another level. They even invented the central bank, and they practiced this foreign direct investment. All these were instruments and things that were becoming very, codified in the Netherlands during this time. And then they also had a very sophisticated banking system, which countries such as ours only got to the other day. They had a whole stream, merchant banking, then they had investment banking, back in those days. And then they also, basically embedded this culture of a stock exchange, right? All these things. So they put into practice and refined almost all of the modern concepts of capitalism, right? Big contributions there. By the year 1670, we're told the Dutch Republic had over 550,000 tons of merchant shipping, or more than half of the whole of Europe's total. They were controlling half of Europe's total trade in terms of movement of goods. Holland was one of the richest, if not the richest country in Europe at that time, and today it is one of the top 20 economies of the world. Truly magnificent success story. Part of it is that they were the first out of in terms of innovation and dominating. It's called first movers advantage business, and they were very quick to seize opportunities and multiply those opportunities.
I think it shows that these are some of the benefits of inclusiveness, whereas the Habsburg Empire was expelling people away, as some local people would try and expel people from their regions. The Northern Netherlands and the Dutch economic miracle was as a result of inclusiveness of people of all cultures, all ideas.
Yes.
And I think it reflects the two kinds and visions of leadership that we also have in our country.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So today we had a winning headline from the Standard, and I'd like to leave you with a quote, once again, for William Ruto, who is desperately clutching at straws right now. Here it is. It's an old saying. When the only tool you've got is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. William Ruto needs to broaden his set of tools, otherwise he will collapse. Have a good evening.